Hey, thanks for joining me. This is the just newly announced EcoFlow Delta 3 power station, replacing the previous Delta 2. I didn't do an unboxing for this because this is actually like a pre-release version. I didn't get normal packaging, so I didn't figure there was much point in showing you the unboxing. But let's take a look and see what kind of cables come in the cable box. We can at least figure that out. All right, we've got a little DC 5525 to DC 5521 adapter cable. We've got a nice heavy-duty AC charging cable. So that must mean this thing can be charged pretty aggressively on AC for fast charging. We'll have to see what that equates to. And then we've got a car charging cable. There's typical 12-volt car connector on it and an XT60i. You can see it's an I because it's got that little data pin right there. So that's how you distinguish those. Also, typically these are orange, whereas the standard XT60s are yellow. At least that's been my experience. So no solar charging cable, but I don't see wireless charging on top. All the AC plugs, 6 in total, just like there were on the Delta 2, but now they're on the front. In the Delta 2, all the DC outputs were on the front and the AC outputs were on the back. And I always found that just a little bit annoying. I know that's a personal preference thing. Some people might actually prefer it the other way. Some people might not care at all. Since I like the AC ports to be right handy and be able to see what I'm doing in the front, I just like those to be all in the front. And they've made that change. And I'm really happy about that. And you do also still have all your USB ports on the front. So you've got a couple of Type-Cs. Now these are the newer 140 watt PD140 Type-C outputs, which is really nice. And then you've got 2 quick charge 18 watt Type A ports. So I like the fact that they're giving you 2 Type-Cs now, not just one. And the other thing is that it's a completely updated display, clearly, with the buttons for everything right here on the top. Now if we go around to the back, this is where everything gets a little bit more interesting. Now on the Delta 2, the battery expansion port was on the side, and notice there's nothing on the side of the unit. So the ports are either in the front or they're in the back. And the expansion port is behind this little plastic door. And I have to be honest, when I first saw this plastic door, I was like, oh, that's disappointing, because I thought that's going to be hanging there, it's going to get in the way, it's probably going to break off. But they apparently thought of that, and it's actually retractable. So you can actually push it in there and get it out of the way. And suddenly I'm a fan, because I didn't really like it if it was just going to hang there, because I know it would get broken off, how hard I typically am on things. Then you've got a 12 volt 10 amp socket on the bottom and a couple of DC 5521 accessory ports on the bottom as well. Now you got your AC charging over here, and then I mentioned this is the Delta 3 Plus, which means that it's got 2 solar panel connector ports here. And each of these ports can handle up to 500 watts of solar with a range of 11 volts up to 60 volts max. So you don't want to exceed 60 volts. But what I like about this is there's actually 2 of them. So instead of 500 watts, which frankly is enough solar charging power to fully charge a 1,024 watt hour capacity power station in under a full day of good sun conditions, this has 1,000 watts, so 500 watts on each port. So if you max this thing out,
these go to 11.
You can actually fully charge this in good sun conditions in less than 2 hours, significantly less than 2 hours, somewhere around the 70-minute mark, which is really impressive. So for all you guys who always comment about some of the power stations and say, oh, that's not enough solar to really make it useful, knowing that not everybody uses solar, but for those of you who do, EcoFlow has been listening. You definitely want the Delta 3 Plus version, because now you get 1,000 watts of solar capacity and be able to charge this thing very quickly. All right, I think that's about all the damage we can do right now. Looks like the display shut off on me. I think there is a new app for this too, so we're going to take a look at that. But let's jump forward in time and run this thing through the paces, find out how it performs. All right, let's do a DC discharge capacity test on this new Delta 3 Plus. Well, it says 99% now. A second ago it said 100. So I did fully discharge or fully recharge and then discharge this unit right before this. So I wanted to try to calibrate the BMS. But let's see how many usable watt hours we can get out of that DC port. I'm using the 12 volt car socket in the back, 12.6 volts, and I've got it set to pull 10 amps. Let me go ahead and get this started and we'll find out how many usable watt hours we actually get. Okay, it did not like the 10 amps. 9 amps. All right, likes 9 amps. Okay, let's run this all the way down. We're only pulling about 100 watts, so we're going to get about 9.5 hours probably out of this, would be my guess. So we'll check back in the morning when this thing is fully depleted and the BMS shuts it down, and we'll find out how many usable watt hours we got through that DC port. All right, our DC discharge capacity test is done. As you can see, we caught 830.9 watt hours, call it 831, and that is out of a rated 1024. So that is 81% of rated capacity, which is right in that average window for usable capacity among all the other power stations I've tested. Okay, let's get this thing fully charged back up and we'll run an AC discharge capacity test. All right, I've got the EcoFlow app up on the phone here and I've added the Delta 3 Plus to it. And we can go into settings here and there's an AC charging speed currently set to 1000 watts, and that nicely matches what we're seeing on screen there. Let's try cranking this all the way up to 1500 watts and see what that says. Now this says, since we are at, call it 0, but we're basically at 2%, that would give us a charge rate fully charged, according to the app, of about 40 minutes, which is really fast charging. And it looks like it's kind of meandering its way up there, probably because we're at such a low state of charge. One thing I noticed right away, as soon as I said that, the fans on my AC inverter kicked in, but the fans on this Delta 3 have not kicked in. I'll have to switch this over to another grid power just so I can show you how quiet this thing is. And this isn't actually grid power, it's just my larger inverter on the solar system that I'm running the barn off of. So that'll take a second to spin back up. The point is, I'm standing right next to this thing. I got the mic next to this. The Delta 2, if you're putting more than about 600 watts into it, would immediately start ramping up pretty high. And this is completely silent. So they have made dramatic improvements in the noise level control on this Delta 3 over the previous Delta 2. So already I'm very impressed. So I know this is new to the app. You can actually say optimize battery charging. So for maximum battery health or longest service life, and it automatically jumped it down to 500 watts. And if I want quiet charging, I mean, it's already completely silent, but I can take it down to 200 watts. But if I'm in a hurry, being able to ramp this thing up to close to 1500 watts and charge in around 40 minutes or so is really handy. Because sometimes you forgot to charge the thing, you need to head out, and you just want to get this thing charged up so you can hit the road. All right, while we are charging via AC, and I have it at maximum charge, let's find out if we can dual charge with solar. I have about 800 watts of solar hooked up. I don't have any idea what I'm getting on that right now. It did detect solar. I can see the icon down there. And let's find out if the charge controller will add above it. Yes, we are kicking up. Actually, what it seems to be doing is lowering the AC charging rate and supplementing it with solar. But what this will do is it will prioritize solar. So whatever solar you're getting, it will use that to charge the battery up to a maximum of 1500 watts, which it's only capable of taking 1000 watts of solar. But when you plug in AC, it'll supplement up to 1500 watts total. Let's say we're getting 500 watts of solar in and I plug AC in. Well, it's only going to draw about 1000 watts from AC. It'll utilize that 500 watts from solar. So that's how that works. That's called a hybrid charging. All right, I got this Delta 3 fully charged back up. Let's go ahead and turn the AC inverter on. And we're going to plug in a load with my watt meter here. And the first thing we're going to do is check to see how much voltage we're getting. We're getting a full 120 volts, so that is excellent. Let me fire up a load. All right, we're going to let this run all the way down till the BMS shuts us off. Find out how many usable watt hours out of that rated 1024 we can get through this AC inverter. And by the way, if you hear the background noise right now, that is my EcoFlow air conditioner, my Wave 2. That is not the Delta 3. The Delta 3 is still completely silent. So let's check back when this thing is fully depleted. All right, looks like our AC discharge capacity test is done. Let's see how we did. All right, we got 910 watt hours out of that rated 1024. So that is a nicely well above average 89% of usable capacity out of this AC inverter. All right, let's do some load testing on this new Delta 3 Plus. I'm actually very interested to find out how this goes, because I want to know if this thing is going to be loud or not. And we're going to test it at various stages. So if I stop talking for a minute, you can see the ambient sound level in this room is about 42 decibels. All right, so let me go ahead and get some load going on here. Let's try 500 watts. Now, actually, what I'm doing is I'm charging a Delta 2, which is about 10 feet away, just outside the room door, and I actually can hear that. So if we look at the decibel meter, it's picked up about 2.5 more decibels just based on the sound that we're hearing from the Delta 2, this predecessor of the Delta 3. All right, let's take that up a little bit higher. I want to see when the fans actually kick on. Still nothing. All right, now we're going to really sort of test this thing. We got up to 1600 watts. All right, let's take that up. See if we can get this very close to 1800 watts. By the way, the fans have still not come on this thing yet. All right, we are at 1824. Let's see if it'll run this for 10 minutes. All right, we have successfully hit the 10-minute mark. So let's take this up a little bit and find out. And by the way, this thing never got above 47 decibels. So EcoFlow has really done a nice job in changing how the ventilation in this system works in the new Delta 3. So it's more front-based rather than side-based, so there's vents on the front and back. So air intake in the front, exhaust in the back. And they're doing a better job with thermal management here in this new model. And I think, and I'm not 100% sure if this is how one of the differences, but it seems like it is. In the Delta 2, the fans would kick on based on, it seemed like based on the AC inverter output load. So let's say, you were at 500 watts output, the fans would automatically kick on and be very, very audible, regardless of the actual temperature. Whereas on the Delta 3, they seem to be more temperature based. And so as long as the ambient temperature or the temperature on the inside of the unit is within a certain threshold, the fans actually don't kick on and only come on when they actually need to. So this is a much quieter unit now. In fact, it's such a dramatic turnaround that the Delta 2 was one of the noisier 1000 watt hour, 1800 watt units that I had tested. The Delta 3 is definitely one of the quietest. So they have definitely solved that particular issue on the Delta 3. All right, let me see if I can dial this up a little bit further. All right, we're up at an extra 100 watts now. Let's just find out how long it'll let us run. Let me go ahead and start this and we'll be counting up. So we're 100 watts over the rated. And I do have X boost off. And I'm going to explain what that is in just a minute. And we'll keep an eye on the voltage. We're at 119 volts. We've only dropped 1 volt, which is outstanding. And we're still pulling in 1912 watts. And what would happen if I turned on X boost? Voltage would drop as current draw goes up. But that's okay for resistive type loads like heaters and lights. It's not great for complex electronics. Just be aware of that. That's why I have X boost off, because I want an accurate indication of what's going on here. So we've been going on a full minute now, 100 watts over that rated 1800 watts. So a full minute at 1900 watts. Let's take it up another 100 watts. Now we're at 2010. Let's see if it's going to shut us off. And again, we've only dropped 1/10 on the voltage. So the voltage drop is well controlled. All right, we're up to 2 minutes now. Now we are at 200 watts over rated 1800. And by the way, I can hear the fans now, but they are still extremely quiet. Well, yeah, so at 2 minutes and 8 seconds or thereabouts, so just over 2 minutes, it did finally cut us off, which is what you want it to do. And the overload indicator is now showing on the display. Yeah, so this Delta 3 is a very, very good performer here on AC output and load testing. So EcoFlow has done some really nice improvements on this Delta 3 over its predecessor. All right, let's do a harmonic distortion test and find out how noisy or not the AC output is on this Delta 3 Plus. And we're going to use my crotchety old crate guitar amp with no noise suppression. Doesn't even have a grounding pin. So let's get a baseline check on what it sounds like, how noisy this thing is just from grid power. So let's try that first. All right, so you heard the slight hum. Not crazy noisy, but there definitely is an audible buzz. Let me go ahead and plug this in to the AC inverter here on the Delta 3. And we have AC power now. Let's go ahead and do the same test and see if we get any difference or any more noise out of that guitar amp. So there is a little more noise from grid power, but I would still give this a pass because that was not enough noise that would bother me as a musician to use a powered amp like this with a remote power source like this Delta 3. All right, so the new Delta 3 actually does have UPS mode, and if we zoom in here on the screen, we can see that UPS indicator on the display is showing, and that is because we have grid power coming in here into the back, but we are passing through grid power for any power that's being consumed right now from the laptop. So we're going to simulate a power outage, but before I do that, I want to point out that most of the time when you look at a power station that claims to have UPS capability or UPS mode, they often tell you that it's approximately 30 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds, and they tell you that it's appropriate for most household type uses, but not appropriate for data centers or servers or things like that. But on this new Delta 3 Plus, EcoFlow is actually speccing 10 millisecond switchover times, which is quick enough to be used for even moderate server type applications. In fact, they tell you it should be perfectly suitable for network attached storage servers, things like that, point of sale systems, and and the like. And it's obviously then also suitable for all the other more common things like backing up routers, CPAP machines, other sort of important things that you don't want to go down in a power outage. All right, but enough talk here. Let's go ahead and simulate a power outage by pulling the power. And we'll just kind of keep our eye on this display, see if the UPS little icon goes out, and we'll also make sure that the laptop does not shut down. And yes, in case you're wondering, I did remove the internal battery on this. So if there is any disruption in power, as I'll demonstrate after this initial test, you'll see the laptop responds by shutting off immediately. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, not so much as a blip on the laptop, but you'll notice we are, well, it's kind of flickering back and forth depending on what the laptop is doing. We are getting some power here being drawn. Let's plug this back in and just see. And I heard the relay click. So we are still supplying power to the laptop. The switchover is very, very quick. And we are getting a little bit of grid power to kind of backfill the state of charge here just a bit. So UPS mode definitely works. Pull that one more time. And just to show you I'm not tricking anything here and that the battery is in fact removed, I'm going to pull the power very quickly and put it back in. All right, that's as fast as I can possibly do that. And you see the laptop went out immediately. All right, so UPS mode on this Delta 3 Plus, a definite pass. All right, let's do an unintended solar charging test and find out if this new Delta 3 Plus will take solar after it's been fully depleted. So I have solar plugged into one of the XT60 ports in the back. As you can see, we are completely out of power here. At least the BMS is going to shut us down, and it will shut itself down in a second. And I'm going to go ahead, there, like it just did. I'm going to go ahead and switch on the solar. It is very dark out right now. In fact, it's 8:16 p.m. So we've got no solar coming in. I've got 800 watts connected, and if you recall, there is a max of 500 watts on each of the 2 XT ports in the back. And we're going to find out if this thing will resume charging on its own in the morning once the sun comes up, or whether I need to wake it up or do something to interact with the unit. All right, it is the next morning. It's about 10 a.m. We do have some sun on the panels, not full alignment yet, but I don't see any lights on. Let's go ahead and turn it on. Does not appear that it was charging. Keeps shutting itself off. It does look like we have a solar icon over here on this little button, or this little part of the display on the left. Let's see what happens if I pull the solar connection and then plug it back in. Looks like a whole lot of nothing. And now we're getting solar. Interesting. All right, it's about 9:30 at night. Very dark outside. We're going to find out. I've got a 400 watt portable solar panel here connected to the Delta 3. And this time I've turned the Delta 3's device timeout setting to never. So it will basically let the screen go to sleep, but this little button here on the power button should continue breathing like that, so it shouldn't actually turn itself off. And we're going to find out if in that state, if it will permit the unit to auto resume solar charging when the sun comes up. So we will check back in the morning and find out if indeed that works or not. All right. It has been a very rainy morning. Things are just now starting to dry out, but it is seriously overcast, as you can see. And the crows are letting everyone know that somebody just opened a garage door. And by the way, if you ever wondered if these things can take some light rain, yep, they generally can, as long as they don't blow over. But taking a look at the Delta 3 Plus, you can see it did wake up, and it is charging at a very modest 24 watts, which isn't going to get it very far for very long, but it is charging on its own. So at least in this particular firmware revision, which is 1.0 pre-release version, the unit does seem to require you to have it in a sort of sleep state. So you have to set the device timeout to never, and then it will auto resume charging. So as long as you do that, you're fine. But once it shuts down, you kind of have to manually wake it up. So just be aware of that. All right, so to summarize what we learned during the testing, the usable battery capacity on this new Delta 3 Plus through the DC outputs is about average. It delivers about 81% of that 1024 rated watt hours. And it does well above average through the AC ports, delivering nearly 90% of that rated capacity. And I'd also point out that the fast charging options and performance of that fast charging on this unit are extremely impressive. The 1500 watt AC charging lets you fully recharge this guy from 0 to 100 in less than an hour. It also is compatible with EcoFlow's 800 watt smart car charger, which I've reviewed previously, and that would let you recharge this thing while you're driving in about an hour and a half, actually less than an hour and a half. And it is compatible with EcoFlow's hybrid power generator, which gives you also sub 1 hour recharging. Now the increase to 1000 watt solar in this will let you recharge with solar in as fast as 70 minutes, even when sky conditions aren't pristine. And you can dual charge, or as EcoFlow calls it, hybrid charge, with both AC and solar simultaneously at up to 1500 watts total. And it will, in that case, prioritize solar input over the AC input to minimize the costs that are associated with AC charging. And speaking of solar charging, let's talk about the Delta 3 Plus's solar capability just a little bit more. One thing that I do want to point out, as we saw in the testing, is that at least in this pre-release unit using the 1.0 firmware, there is something of a caveat there, in that at least for now, it does seem that if you let the unit completely shut down on you, either through an auto timeout or maybe through a low state of charge situation where it automatically shuts down, you do have to manually turn the unit back on right now in order to get solar charging to resume. Now that's not a super uncommon behavior. Plenty of other power stations behave this way. But given the extremely cool functionality that EcoFlow has included in the new mobile app that supports the Delta 3 Plus, the current inability to automatically wake up when solar input is present does take some of the wind out of those new features versus the enhanced functionality that you'd otherwise have if it could auto resume solar charging from a shutdown state. So let's jump into the mobile app and have a look at what I'm talking about. All right, jumping into the app here, let's go ahead and click on the Delta 3 Plus, and we can see the kind of the usual stuff on the main screen here with inputs and outputs. But let's click on the settings icon up there in the upper right-hand corner, that little bolt. And this is where the real interesting stuff happens. There's an output port memory section. And if we click on the question mark there to kind of see what that does, it says the AC and DC output ports will memorize their on and off status when the device is powered off or when the device stops running due to a low state of charge in the battery. And then when it regains power or when charges to a sufficient level, it'll automatically remember what was running, whether it's DC or AC or both, and it'll reactivate those outputs. And that's something that a lot of you guys have been asking for. And I've always, so far, had to say, you know, it's something we just don't typically see on a portable power station type solution. But now EcoFlow is building that into the app. So that's pretty cool. Now here's where the stuff gets really interesting. In this savings-oriented / backup settings section, you can set the charge and discharge limits. And this really has nothing to do with savings, but it's real more for, do I want to try to extend the overall unit service life for the battery cells by preventing discharge all the way down to 0 or charging all the way to 100. You could say, for example, I only want to drop it down to 8% max, and when I charge it, I'm only going to charge it to, say, 90%. And if I set it to that, I'm going to have some positive benefit or positive impact on the overall service life because I'm stressing those battery cells just a little bit less. Operating mode is kind of interesting because it does allow you to set a backup reserve and time of use. So if you get, let's say, you get much lower or much more economical electricity rates after like 9 p.m. through the weekday, you can set that up in here so that it only charges the unit when your electricity rates are low. Now again, that's a lot more beneficial when you have a much higher capacity unit than when you have something that's only 1,024 watt hours. But it's nice that they're building these functions into the app now, regardless of which power station you're using. All right, if we jump back out there, now this is where I think there is probably the most interesting new ads. So scheduled tasks. If I click on scheduled tasks, you can see there's a number of categories here. There's charging category, so either via AC or DC, and that's solar or car charging, and that's using either port 1 or port 2 since there are two XT60 connectors on the back. And you can set the behavior different for each of those ports. So you could use one of those input ports for car charging, the other one for solar, and then arrange their scheduled task behavior based on how you've got that configured. I think that's pretty powerful. And then you've got AC discharging, DC discharging, and USB discharging. And you can schedule tasks to turn on those ports at a certain time, provided that the unit has enough state of charge to do so. But that really gives you a tremendous amount of control over how the unit behaves unattended. And that, I think, is probably some of the most key functionality that they have added to this app using with this Delta 3 Plus. So I think the main takeaways here is that while I do hope that EcoFlow does address that auto wake up and charge from a shutdown state in a future firmware update, even if they don't, I think this new app functionality enabling you to schedule, charge, and discharge tasks from both AC and DC, including USB, is an extremely welcome leap forward from their previous feature set. And as far as I'm aware, I think that the only other brand that I've seen, offering this kind of advanced functionality would be Dobson. And while I do like Dobson's mobile app well enough, there's no question that the EcoFlow mobile app UI is much more polished, and it does provide a much more intuitive user experience, in my opinion, for what it's worth. Now, in terms of warranty and pricing, the new Delta 3 Plus does come with EcoFlow's very impressive 5-year warranty, and that's definitely worth more coming from an established brand name versus a name that maybe you haven't heard of before and is just entering the market. Because you know that EcoFlow has been around for quite a while now, and they're still probably going to be here in 5 years to back up that warranty in case that you actually need it. And you can pre-order this Delta 3 Plus right now directly from EcoFlow's website for a very competitive $649. And they'll also throw in, I think, a waterproof carrying case for it. And they'll be shipping these units starting in late October, I believe. And per usual, I will put a link for you in the video description below if you're interested in checking it out. And if you're interested in seeing what kinds of things that you can run with this Delta 3 Plus and how long it'll run those things, I'll also include a link to my Google spreadsheet below for you. And please do be aware that you'll need to download your own copy of that spreadsheet so that you can key in the 1800 watt inverter capacity and the 1024 watt hour battery capacity of this Delta 3 Plus. So don't waste your time requesting permission from me to edit the shared version of the spreadsheet directly. For obvious reasons, I need to keep that locked down. So just download your own copy and then you can edit it however you want. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I do hope you found at least something helpful in the video. If you did, please consider clicking on that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. And if you're not already a subscriber, maybe consider subscribing as well. I do offer my sincere thanks that you spend a little bit of your valuable time by stopping by and watching this video with me, and I hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.